"No one will know I'm here." This caption under a photo of a crying woman, sent from an encrypted account, became a digital ghost, the last known message from Helga Petersen. A message that never reached its recipient, remaining in the deleted files of a phone belonging to one of the most influential people in Qatar. The story of the disappearance of 30-year-old Helga Petersen, a designer from Hamburg, did not receive wide coverage in the world press. Incidents affecting the interests of the Middle Eastern elite rarely leak beyond closed diplomatic channels and the quiet offices of private detective agencies. The first few months of 2019 were eventful for Helga, which, according to her close friend Clara Meyer, seemed to her like the script of a Hollywood movie. Helga was a talented yet relatively unknown fashion designer who owned a small studio in the Altona district of Hamburg. Her work was characterized by minimalist cuts and attention to complex fabric textures, but she was unable to break into the highly competitive European market. Financial difficulties and creative stagnation created fertile ground for offers that promised a quick solution to all her problems. Such an offer was made in February 2019 by the elite Swiss agency Global Elite Solutions, which positioned itself as a concierge service for ultra-wealthy clients. In reality, as a private investigator hired by the Petersen family would later discover, the agency specialized in finding companions for influential individuals, guaranteeing complete confidentiality and legal support for contracts. The client who showed interest in Helga turned out to be 47-year-old Sheikh Yusuf Al-Tamimi, a member of one of the side branches of the ruling dynasty of Qatar and a major player in the liquefied natural gas market. His fortune, by the most conservative estimates, was estimated at billions of dollars. An agency representative contacted Helga with a unique opportunity to become a personal style consultant and wardrobe designer for a Middle Eastern tycoon with a virtually unlimited budget. She was promised her own studio in Doha, access to the rarest materials, and full funding for her own clothing collection. After several video calls, during which Yusuf Al-Tamimi appeared to her as a charming, educated, and art-loving man, Helga agreed to a personal meeting in Paris. The Sheikh's courtship was methodical and overwhelming. He rented a penthouse for her at the Georges Feyre Hotel, gave her jewelry from Cartier, and antique books on the history of costume. He talked about her talent, about a future in which she would become the queen of fashion, free from financial worries. He made no indecent proposals, cultivating the image of a patron of the arts, enchanted by her genius. Helga's family, particularly her older brother Thomas Petersen, reacted to what was happening with undisguised skepticism. He was alarmed by the speed with which events were unfolding and the opacity of the Sheikh himself. However, Helga, blinded by the prospects and scale of Al-Tamimi's personality, ignored the warnings. In early March 2019, she signed a contract with a shell company registered in Cyprus. The 120-page contract not only outlined her professional responsibilities, but also included a clause prohibiting her from disclosing any information about the client's personal life. This document effectively transferred control over her movements and contacts to her employer. In mid-March, she left Hamburg, telling her family that she was heading to Doha to work on her dream project. Her new home was one of the villas in the gated luxury complex West Bay Lagoon, located on an artificial island off the coast of Doha. The complex was a maze of luxurious mansions separated from each other by high walls, with private beaches and round-the-clock security. It was impossible to enter the territory without an invitation from a resident. For the first few weeks, Helga's life was truly like a fairy tale. The Sheikh provided her with a staff of servants, a personal driver, and unlimited credit cards. She regularly sent photos to her family and friends from luxurious restaurants, boutiques, and aboard a private yacht. However, her messages, which cybersecurity experts later analyzed, already showed signs of alarm. She mentioned that she was rarely alone, constantly accompanied by bodyguards, and that her new phone, a gift from Yusuf, seemed to be malfunctioning. Some messages did not go through, and calls were cut off. By the end of April, the tone of her letters had changed. She wrote that she was tired, that work on the collection had not yet begun, and that her days were reduced to attending social events, where she played the role of a beautiful accessory. She complained of total control. The Sheikh checked her calls, read her correspondence, and flew into a rage if she tried to contact her male friends in Germany. The promised paradise life turned out to be a gilded cage from which there was no escape. The last call to her brother took place in early May. Helga spoke in a whisper. She was frightened. She said that she had made a mistake and wanted to return home, but did not know how. She mentioned that her passport and personal documents were being held by Yusuf. The next day, her phone stopped answering. All attempts by her family to contact her through the Global Elite Solutions Agency were met with silence. A week later, representatives of the agency reported that Mrs. Peterson had terminated her contract of her own accord and left Qatar for an unknown destination. In mid-May 2019, the Peterson family officially reported her disappearance to the Hamburg police. The German police, in turn, sent a request to Interpol, but the investigation effectively reached a dead end. The Qatari authorities were reluctant to cooperate, citing sovereignty and the lack of evidence of a crime on their territory. Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi's status and influence made him virtually immune to his country's law enforcement system. To the outside world, Helga Peterson had disappeared. Powerlessness is the word that best describes the state of the Peterson family in the months that followed. Official channels of communication turned into a bureaucratic desert. The German Foreign Ministry expressed deep concern, but emphasized the need to observe diplomatic protocol. The Qatari side, through its embassy in Berlin, provided a laconic response. German citizen Helga Peterson entered the country on a private invitation and then left its territory, as confirmed by border service records. However, they refused to provide a copy of these records, citing personal data protection laws. Every request from the German police sent through Interpol channels remained unanswered. The family found themselves trapped in a jurisdictional vacuum. For Germany, the crime was not committed on their territory, and for Qatar, there was no crime at all. Yusuf al-Tamimi remained an untouchable figure, protected by his status and a wall of silence erected by his legal team. Thomas Peterson, Helga's brother, refused to accept this situation. He took indefinite leave from work and devoted himself entirely to the search for his sister. He created a website dedicated to her disappearance. He tried to attract the attention of the press, but the major publications were reluctant to publish material containing accusations against a member of Qatar's ruling family without solid evidence. By August 2019, having exhausted all official avenues, Thomas decided to seek the services of a private specialist. He chose the Berlin-based consulting agency Fortitudo Security, headed by Daniel Fischer, a former operative of the German Federal Intelligence Service. Fischer specialized in cases that government agencies refused to take on: kidnappings in high-risk areas, corporate espionage, and searching for people missing abroad. After studying the materials provided by the Peterson family, Fischer immediately identified the scale of the problem. A direct investigation in Qatar was out of the question. Any suspicious activity by a foreign agent would lead to his immediate arrest and an international scandal. The only option was to work remotely, gathering information bit by bit from open and closed sources. Fischer spent his first weeks compiling a detailed psychological and biographical profile of Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi. He was not just a businessman, but a key figure in the complex intra-clan intrigues of the Qatari elite. His public image, that of an enlightened patron of the arts, an Oxford graduate, and a connoisseur of European culture, was strikingly different from the information Fischer was receiving through his unofficial channels. Fisher discovered a pattern. Over the past 10 years, at least 4 young women from Europe and North America associated with Al-Tamimi had disappeared under similar circumstances. Among them were a French model, a Canadian student, and a British gallery owner. In all cases, the story unfolded according to the same scenario. The Sheikh charmed them, promising to support their careers, took them to Doha, and then, after a few months, the women disappeared without a trace. Their families received generous financial compensation through offshore accounts in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. None of these cases ever came to the attention of the police. It was a well-oiled machine, where human life was just another item on the expense side of the budget. The breakthrough in the case came unexpectedly. While analyzing social media and forums for expatriates working in Qatar, Fisher's team stumbled upon a post left by a woman under a pseudonym. She wrote about the unbearable working conditions at a villa in West Bay Lagoon and mentioned a terrible story with a German designer. It took several weeks of painstaking work to identify the author of the post. She turned out to be a Filipino citizen named Rosalyn Magsaysay, who worked as a maid at the Al-Tamimi residence and was fired at the end of May 2019, almost immediately after Helga's disappearance. Fisher found Rosalyn in the suburbs of Manila. The woman lived in constant fear. When she was fired, the Sheikh's security service forced her to sign non-disclosure documents, threatening to take revenge on her family in her homeland. It was tough to convince her to testify. Fisher guaranteed her and her family's relocation to Europe and a witness protection program, using his old connections in government circles. Rosalyn's story was the missing link in the chain of events. She confirmed that in the last weeks of her life at the villa, Helga was profoundly depressed and constantly in conflict with the Sheikh. He forbade her from using the internet and took away her personal German phone. According to Rosalyn, the last argument took place on the night of May 3rd. Helga accused Yusuf of being a liar and a jailer and said she would find a way to report everything to the embassy. The Sheikh, who was drunk that evening, flew into a rage. Rosalyn heard screams, the sound of blows, and a dull thud, as if something heavy had fallen on the floor. After that, a dead silence fell over the villa. The next morning, the Sheikh announced to the staff that Mrs. Peterson had left in urgent circumstances due to family matters. However, none of the servants saw her leave the house or a car come to take her to the airport. Moreover, Rosalyn noticed that Helga's 2 large travel bags were still in the dressing room. The most ominous detail of her story was that the day after Helga's supposed departure, a team of gardeners who did not belong to the regular service company arrived at the villa. These workers labored in the farthest part of the garden, near the wall, where a large stone statue of a lion, brought from Italy, stood. They worked all night using a small excavator and left in the morning. After their visit, the ground around the statue was freshly dug up and covered with new rolled turf. Rosalyn was sure that something had been buried in the garden that night. Rosalyn Magsaysay's testimony significantly altered the case's status, but it also created a challenging tactical dilemma for Daniel Fisher and the Peterson family. They had information about the probable burial site, but there was no legal way to use it. Any attempt to initiate a search of Sheikh Al-Tamimi's villa, based on the testimony of a single witness, who was also thousands of kilometers away, was doomed to failure. Moreover, premature disclosure of the source of the information would put Rosalyn in mortal danger. The Qatari security service, known for its efficiency, would have easily found her and silenced her forever. Fisher understood that acting head-on was tantamount to destroying the only chance for justice. It was necessary to create a situation in which the discovery of the remains would appear to be accidental, rather than the result of a targeted search. The strategy shifted from a direct investigation to a multi-step combination aimed at making the system work against itself. The first step was to create a comprehensive confidential dossier. It was not just a report, but a meticulously compiled document designed to influence the highest echelons of German diplomacy. It included a complete biography of the Sheikh with an emphasis on his shady side, a detailed analysis of previous cases of women's disappearances, the financial schemes used to buy their silence, and a complete, notarized transcript of Rosalind Magsaysay's testimony. A key element of the dossier was a technical report prepared by a satellite image analysis expert hired by Fisher. Comparing archival images of the West Bay Lagoon Villa from April and late May 2019, the expert found clear signs of soil disturbance in the very part of the garden described by Rosalind. The May images clearly showed a rectangular area that differed in color and density from the surrounding area, irrefutable evidence of recent earthworks. With this document in hand, Fisher used his old connections to arrange an informal meeting with a high-ranking official from the Middle East Department of the German Foreign Ministry. The reaction was predictable, caution bordering on fear. A confrontation with Qatar, one of Europe's key suppliers of liquefied natural gas, could lead to a serious energy and diplomatic crisis. However, the evidence presented by Fisher, especially the witness testimony backed up by satellite data, was too compelling to ignore. The German government could not launch an official investigation, but it could take action through unofficial channels. The German ambassador in Doha received an encrypted dispatch with instructions to apply soft pressure. At one of the protocol meetings with a representative of the Qatari Foreign Ministry, the ambassador casually mentioned the case of the missing German citizen, Helga Petersen, noting that more and more questions are being asked in Berlin, and that this story could negatively affect the investment climate if a satisfactory solution is not found. Sheikh al-Tamimi's name was not mentioned, but the hint was crystal clear. At the same time, Fisher's team continued to monitor all activity related to the Sheikh around the clock, and here luck smiled on them, which, however, was the result of systematic work. Analyzing contracts signed by one of the construction companies owned by al-Tamimi, Fisher's analysts discovered a large order for landscaping work on the grounds of his villa in West Bay Lagoon. The project, scheduled for November 2019, included the construction of a new swimming pool and the redesign of the garden in the very area where the lion statue was located. The Sheikh's motives were simple. He was a man obsessed with status and luxury, and he was constantly remodeling his residence. He was so confident of his impunity that he had probably already forgotten about the terrible secret that the earth in his garden held. This information proved decisive. The German ambassador received new instructions. At the next meeting, he again raised the subject of the missing Helga Petersen and, referring to unverified intelligence, mentioned that her disappearance could have been violent and that her body might still be in Qatar. It was a calculated move. Germany did not make a direct accusation, but made it clear that it had information and warned that any accidental discovery of remains would be closely scrutinized. The calculation was that the Qatari authorities, not wanting an international scandal, would not allow the Sheikh to hide the evidence if it was found. On November 22, 2019, a team of workers from Pakistan and Nepal began work in the villa's garden. The Sheikh was on a business trip to London at the time. At around 4 p.m., the bucket of a small excavator digging soil at the site of the future pool basin struck a hard object. The workers, thinking it was a rock, tried to remove it. When they cleared the ground, they saw a large bundle of thick black polyethylene wrapped in several layers of reinforced tape. The foreman, an elderly Pakistani man, immediately halted all work and, realizing the seriousness of the situation, called the local police directly, not the villa's security service. The patrol that arrived at the scene cordoned off the area. They did not open the package immediately. It was carefully removed and sent to the central morgue in Doha for examination. The news of the discovery of human remains at the villa of a member of the ruling family instantly reached the country's top leadership. And at that very moment, German diplomacy came into play again. The German embassy sent an official note to the Qatari Foreign Ministry demanding that its representative be allowed to participate in the identification of the body and be given access to the case files, citing strong reasons to believe that the remains found could belong to missing German citizen Helga Petersen. The trap had been sprung. It was now virtually impossible to conceal the discovery or falsify the examination results under the scrutiny of German diplomats. The procedure that followed the discovery of the remains became the arena of a quiet struggle between the Qatari judiciary, seeking to maintain control over the situation, and the German side, insisting on maximum transparency. Under pressure from diplomats, the Qatari authorities took an unprecedented step. Dr. Klaus Richter, a forensic anthropologist from the German Federal Criminal Police Office, was admitted to the forensic examination team as an observer. His presence ruled out the possibility of falsification or concealment of the results. The expert's conclusion was unequivocal, leaving no room for interpretation. The remains belonged to a Caucasian woman between the ages of 25 and 35 years old. The cause of death was multiple skull fractures inflicted by a heavy blunt object, as well as asphyxia caused by compression of the neck, as evidenced by a fracture of the hyoid bone. The time of death was established with an accuracy of several weeks and fully corresponded to the period of Helga Petersen's disappearance. After cleaning, the fabric fragments found with the body were identified as silk from a dress by the French fashion house Givenchy, the same dress Helga was wearing in the last photo she sent to her friend in Doha. The final and irrefutable proof came from genetic testing. DNA samples taken from the bone tissue were sent to Germany for comparison with the genetic material provided by Helga's parents. The match was 100%. On December 28, 2019, the Qatari authorities officially notified the German embassy that the body found at the villa in West Bay Lagoon had been identified as the remains of German citizen Helga Petersen. Sheikh Yusuf al-Tamimi was detained immediately upon his return from London. However, his detention had nothing to do with standard procedure. He was not placed in a detention center, but was escorted to one of his family's country palaces, effectively putting him under luxurious house arrest. He was immediately surrounded by a team of top lawyers from London and Beirut who began to build a defense strategy. The strategy was predictable: complete denial of guilt and shifting of responsibility. During the first interrogations, the Sheikh said he was shocked and devastated. He claimed to love Helga and considered her his closest friend. According to his account, she left Qatar in early May after a minor quarrel, and he had no idea what had happened to her afterward. He called the discovery of her body on the grounds of his villa a monstrous provocation organized by his enemies in business or politics to discredit him. His lawyers developed this theory, claiming that unknown assailants killed Helga elsewhere and then broke into the villa and buried the body to frame the Sheikh. This version, however, did not stand up to scrutiny. The residence's security system, which included motion sensors, dozens of cameras, and round-the-clock security posts, made it virtually impossible to enter unnoticed for digging. While the Sheikh's lawyers tried to create a media storm, Qatari investigators, working under the tacit supervision of their German colleagues, focused on digital evidence. All electronic devices belonging to al-Tamimi were seized. And this is where the defense suffered a crushing defeat. Cybercrime specialists managed to recover data deleted from the Sheikh's main phone several months earlier. Among hundreds of gigabytes of useless information, they found the very file they were looking for. A photo taken with the front camera late in the evening on May 2nd, 2019. The picture showed Helga Petersen's tear-stained face. Analysis of the background lighting and interior elements captured in the frame clearly indicated that the photo was taken in her bedroom at the villa. But the main piece of evidence was the message she had typed in the Messenger app, but never sent. "No one will know I'm here." The file's metadata contained the exact time and geolocation, which completely coincided with the place and time of her death, as established by the investigation. This discovery rendered the entire line of defense ineffective. The photograph was irrefutable proof that Helga had no intention of leaving voluntarily. She was a captive who was aware of the mortal danger she faced. A public trial of a member of the ruling family was absolutely out of the question. Such a trial would have caused irreparable damage to Qatar's reputation and could have provoked an internal political crisis. The solution was found in the traditions of the closed political system of the Middle East. In February 2020, a closed session of the Sharia court was held. The public was only informed that the trial was taking place. Based on the evidence presented, witness testimony, forensic medical examination results, and digital evidence, Yusuf al-Tamimi was found guilty of murder. However, the sentence was as lenient as possible. Instead of the death penalty or life imprisonment in a state prison, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in one of the remote residences belonging to the state. He was stripped of all his business assets, his name was removed from all official lists, and his public existence effectively ceased. To the outside world, he ceased to exist. This was the ultimate punishment for a member of the elite. Helga Petersen's family received her remains in March 2020. They buried her in a small cemetery near Hamburg. There was no official apology or public admission of guilt from the Qatari authorities. However, a multi-million-dollar sum was transferred to the family's account through a Swiss bank as compensation. Rosalind Magsaysay and her family were successfully smuggled to Germany, where they were provided with new documents and granted asylum. The story of Helga Petersen never became public knowledge, remaining just one of many untold tragedies that occurred behind the high walls of palaces, where absolute power and impunity blurred the line between fairy tale and deadly trap.